Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast and occasionally video game podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly and I'm joined as always by the All-Father himself. It's Mr. Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
You know who I am. Let's get this show on the road.
See, I guess it's been too long since I played the game because I don't remember that scene in the game.
See, this is what happened is I played it in parallel with my son, and so I basically watched the entire game once and played the entire game once already. So I remember it really well.
I'm just going to assume that was an extremely clever reference and chuckle quietly to myself.
It's the first thing Odin says when he shows up is he's just like, you know who I am? He doesn't introduce himself or anything.
Yeah. I do know who he is. He's from the West Wing.
Yeah, he's such an interesting choice. We'll get to Odin, though.
Yeah. This week on the show, we are here to talk about the newest video game from Santa Monica Studios, God of War Ragnarok, the sequel to the 2018, 17?
18, yep.
18 video game that is Matt's favorite thing in the whole wide world. We were scheduled here to talk about a Ridley Scott movie, but Matt completed God of War Ragnarok this week and just would not stop talking about it. And
it's
so
true.
We thought it made perfect sense for this to be the time to go ahead and do that episode, and then we'll pick up Ridley Scott later. So that is going to be what today's show is. We are going to go into full spoilers, deep discussion about this video game. Normally I think like, hey, let's have a non-spoilers discussion. I don't know how to do that, Matt. I don't. The game's been out for a couple months. If you haven't finished it yet, probably just don't listen and come back after you've beaten the game. I don't know how to talk about this game without spoiling the first game or really getting into what this game is doing.
Really, the only things you could say would be about gameplay. And while we probably will talk a little bit about gameplay, I think we're probably more interested in talking about story, both of us.
Sure.
Gameplay wise up front, I guess pre-spoilers, I'd just say like, yeah, it's everything good about the first game except expanded gameplay wise. Like that's true.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say if you like the first game, you're probably going to find something to enjoy here for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, let's get into it, Matt. Let's waste no further time and get into God of War Ragnarok. Matt, I've copied a little summary here from the wonderful aggregator website Metacritic. So why don't you tell me what this video game's about?
The freezing winds of Fimbulwinter have come to Midgard, making survival for Kratos, Atreus, and Mimir in the Norse wilds even more challenging than before. Kratos, still bearing the knowledge of his past mistakes, wants to spare Atreus the bloody lessons he learned from his conflict with gods. He wants to keep his son safe above all, and their confrontation with Baldur has vindicated the belief that only tragedy will come from further entanglements with the Aesir.
It went on from there, but I feel like that was sufficient. I mean, better than IMDb, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's more detailed, but it's it's complicated.
Sure. As we said, this video game was produced by Santa Monica Studios. It is directed by Eric Williams and Corey Barlog, who I believe also directed the first game in the series. Is that correct?
Yes, he did. Barlog did, yeah.
Yeah. Eric Williams is a new addition, probably because it's a 10 times bigger game, which is something we need to get into. But I think we need to preface this conversation assuming that perhaps some of our listeners have not listened to us talk about the first game, because the reason we kind of started talking about these games in the first place is because you went insane about them.
Yeah.
I mean, and we'll don't spend too long on this, but the first game is like one of the only games I've ever heard of you like beating every little tiny thing on it on the absolute hardest difficulty, full clearing it, got the platinum trophy or whatever it's called. Just went ham for this game because you loved it so much. So the release of the sequel is like the moment of the year or of last year for you.
Basically, yeah. It was one of those things that I got obsessed with to an insane degree, and yeah, I still love that game. Like I still think God of War 2018 is like a perfect thing, perfect piece of art that exists and that I still recommend to people. And you know, honestly, this game had a lot to live up to. And sure. I'm gonna like preface this whole conversation by saying like I really don't want to get trapped in a thing where I keep unfavorably comparing this game against the first one, and even framing it that way, it's like, oh, so Matt didn't like this game as much as the first one. And I guess I'll just say the first one had the advantage of being a very simple, compelling hook of a story and a simple, compelling theme and through line
Mm-hmm.
that just perfectly carries you through and keeps you propelled and engaged and in love with the characters, and then resolves in a way that's extremely satisfying. And it's just one of those great stories, one of those great, simple, effective stories. And with this game, what they did is they were like, we're going to have, like you said, like 10 times as many characters and plot lines. And the themes are going to be a little bit more nuanced, in a way that makes the clarity of the storytelling less propulsive. And we're going to split off, and we're going to follow Atreus, and we're going to follow Kratos, and we're going to follow Atreus, and we're going to follow, and like all this stuff. It's like really cool that they did it, and I like it. I like that they did all this stuff, but it on the like the effect of it is actually to sort of distance you from it, and it becomes more like an epic. It's like an epic saga of fantasy novels rather than a nice 300 page turner that really sucks you in, which is what I would compare the first game to. So overall, I love the experience, but like that's in my head. That's what's in my head when if you hear me make some of these like comparison and contrast with the first game. Do you agree with what I just said? By the way, does that vibe with
I
you?
do. I do. I think this is kind of the curse of a sequel in a lot of ways, that you have this game that is allowed to be this one thing, that is this one specific thing, and it has this one specific goal, and we are introducing all these new characters, but every single one of these characters, the things that they do in the story are all in service of this one specific thing. And that is the advantage of telling a one game in a new world. I know it's technically a sequel to a bunch of God of War games, but in essence, this is like basically a reboot. This is an entirely new thing. And so the first game had this clarity and focus to it, and then this game needs to one up on that. It wants to be bigger. It is literally bigger. The game is like 2 times as long as the first one, and then also these characters are not just tools to further the plot of the Kratos and the Atreus relationship, which, I mean, that's simplifying it. Like, I'm not saying they were bad characters in the first game. They weren't, but we care about them now beyond just how they specifically tie into the themes. And so we want to explore them more, and we want to explore them in ways that in many ways do tie into the overarching theme of the thing, but also just we want to know what's going on with them. We want to explore them. We want to learn more about them. We want to dig deeper into them. And that does just in essence create a sprawl to it. I think this is really funny because it's just on my mind lately, because the Last of Us television show just came out this past Sunday, which is, I think it's basically my God of War for you to put that in perspective. I beat it on the hardest difficulty. I absolutely love that game. The sequel came out a few years ago. Absolutely love that game too. I know that was a very contentious, controversial game that a lot of people didn't like. I think it's brilliant. I think it's a masterpiece, but it is not as good as the first one. It's just not. And it's for honestly many of the same reasons. The game is 2 times as long. They're trying to do a bunch more complicated things. They're diving into these themes in really deep, interesting ways, but you lose a little focus, you lose a little clarity, you lose a little pacing. And I think that is one of the things that if I'm being critical of this game that I really, really enjoyed in God of War Ragnarok, it is that with all this sprawl, with all this exploration, the pacing of just the primary story of Kratos, of Atreus, of how they're interacting with Odin and Thor and all this stuff just kind of suffers a little bit. It stretches it out so far that I think in the act of playing, you kind of lose focus as a player on what are we doing overall with this story? Is that, I
Yeah.
mean, do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that's why it took me so long to finish. But part of the reason was that I was trying to sort of play in tandem with my son, and only could play when he could play at first. But honestly, the other part of the reason is that I just wasn't all that hooked into the story, and I wasn't really compelled to see what happened next story wise. I was just like, okay, yeah, it's fine. I'm enjoying it. I'm having a great time. The combat is obviously amazing, right? It's just fun to
Mm-hmm,
play.
mm-hmm.
But it was only after I got to a certain point in the game maybe like halfway through the story, honestly, that I became like, oh, I'm like actually really invested, and I really care about what's going to happen here. Like I think it was about, if I have to pick a point in time, it's like when Kratos becomes worried about Heimdall, basically, or maybe it was around the time when Heimdall shows up as a character, which I think
Yeah, so
is,
so basically when Atreus goes
yeah,
to
to Asgard.
Asgard for the first time. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, now there's sort of some propulsiveness here, because it's like, okay, we got to deal with the Heimdall situation, and then that leads
Mhm.
into the next thing, and that leads into the next thing. But prior to that, there's a lot of table setting, and again, I don't want to be like, and therefore it sucks. It's like, no, it's just a slower story. It's just a slower kind of story that they're doing. And
Yeah.
the other thing which makes it really, I think, totally distinct from the other game is that they snuck in a choose your own adventure dynamic storytelling thing on us without even really making a lot of fanfare about it. Like, and so what I mean is specifically like, okay, in the previous game, yeah, you could go off and do all these side quests, and they were all sort of like integrated with the theme, where there were, a lot of the side quests in the old game were like thematically related to the main themes, and so forth. And you learn a little bit more about, little nuances of Kratos and Atreus' relationship, but there was never anything important hidden in the side quests. But that is not really true in this game. In
No.
in this game, there's whole parts of the game where like you're learning important backstory about Mimir, or about Faye, or about these other characters that you, number one, you care about in and of themselves, and then also you like they're relevant to the plot of Kratos and Atreus. And they're just totally off in Vanaheim somewhere, or in Svartalfheim somewhere, and like you don't have to do it. It's totally optional. I'm sure there's stuff that I haven't even done yet, because I did a bunch of side quests, but far from 100%ing everything on this playthrough. And so it becomes a dynamic choose your own adventure story. You probably experienced a different story than I did, in a certain sense. And on top of all of that, I realized at a certain point, I hadn't even done this on purpose or thought about it, but I was like, oh, I've been doing this whole Svartalfheim quest with Freya as my companion, because this just happens to be the part of the story where you were doing the Vanaheim stuff, and so now Freya's with me. Um, and she had dialogue for everything I was doing.
Mhm.
And I realized, like, oh, so if I had Atreus with me, he would certainly have dialogue. So they literally recorded all of the dialogue for probably all of the side quests with both of these characters, and in
Yeah.
both cases, you're learning slightly different information about Freya, and how she reacts to things versus how Atreus would. And I'm like, oh my god, like that's so cool. Actually, like it really deepens the sense of this as a universe, and a world that you're inhabiting and interacting with, rather than just something that you're passively receiving. I thought that was really incredibly cool, actually.
It certainly is, and I think it's really interesting to compare or to complain about pacing in a video game, because especially a video game like this, where a lot of the reasons the pace slowed down is because I chose to do all this side stuff, and
Right.
I didn't do all of it. But like I would make conscious effort to be like, the game would say like, here's this big giant fucking area for you to explore now. You could go do the main quest, or you could go do this stuff, and I
Hmm.
chose to do that stuff, thus stopping the story from moving for the next 45 minutes. Or I mean the overall story.
Hmm.
Obviously there is still story in these quests, you're absolutely right. And it is, and that's like, it's so interesting, because I loved that stuff. I loved getting to explore these characters more. I mean, the one thing that I think you're talking about is the crater area near the end of the game, that is basically big enough to just be an entire freaking game of
Hmm.
its own. It's this huge, massive, completely optional area with like 4 dragons you have to find and then beat up, and then like there's a guy that you got to save, and then also an incredibly important storyline that you learn about when Kratos' wife fought against Thor. And like it's this really fascinating look into who she was as a person, because that's a character we've never really gotten to explore in these games. It's only kind of been through the recollection and the mirroring of what Kratos thought of her, and we learn that she's a complicated, fully realized person as well. And all that stuff is great, but it has nothing to do, or very little to do, with Odin. And it's like I realized at one point that I've been playing this game for 20 hours and I haven't seen the main antagonist. He has not entered into my video game world
Uh-huh.
for a long time, and that just feels weird. And it's like, it's one of the things that is just this, I think it's one of the things that is this natural push and pull of cinematic storytelling in a video game, where you being in control of the character is a key part of the experience. It
Mhm.
absolutely is. Like, this is not a game that's like the Telltale games, where like you make a choice and your choice dictates how the things are going to play out in the end. That's not the type of game it is. It is cinema. It is, you, at the end of the day, you're watching cutscenes after you beat up the boss, and then you watch a cutscene, right?
Mhm.
um but it is still paramount to what the game is doing, that you are the ones doing that thing. Like, it's acknowledging that, yes, I'm not making a decision whether or not Kratos is going to kill Heimdall, but I'm the one doing it at the end of the day. I'm the one pressing those buttons. So
Mhm.
that is a key factor to how these type of games work. And so I'm in control. So how can I complain about pacing when I'm the one choosing to do these things? It's like, well, the game is inviting me to do these things as well. So I don't know. It's this push and pull, this desire to have all this extra side quest. Like, I think there's this thing in especially AAA games that, like, this game is expensive. It costs $70 if you play it on PS5, and it needs to take up a sufficient amount of time for a person to see this as a worthy investment. It can't just be a 12-hour experience. It's got to be more than that. So we have to pack it with all this side stuff. And to Santa Monica Studios' credit, the side stuff they packed it with has all been packed not just with content, but with story and character, and that's why it's great. But it's like, what do I want? What would I prefer? Would I prefer the streamlined direct storyline where, like, we're interacting with Odin constantly throughout it, or I'd prefer the game that I made out of this game the first time I played it? I don't know. I've been rambling for a while. I don't know. I don't know if I have a clear solution to this.
Yeah, no, I've been actually sort of struggling as you're talking, because I'm like, I don't think I would ever say like, oh, I wish they hadn't put the Svartalfheim stuff in there because it
Mm-hmm.
was a
Mm-hmm.
distraction. It's like, no, I'm glad they did. It's cool that it's there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's cool that like I can go do it now that I've finished the game too, presumably. But it's sort of the issue maybe is something more like the main storyline doesn't pull on you hard enough to make you want to pursue it aggressively. And even that I wouldn't say is necessarily a flaw. Like um the only thing that I could even vaguely call like a storytelling flaw was a moment where it was right after we killed Heimdall, and then I went and did a bunch of quest stuff, bunch of side quest stuff, hours and hours of side quest stuff. And
uh-huh,
then we get
uh-huh.
back, and then I would go back to Sindri's house, and it's like, okay, we got to get back to Asgard quickly before Odin notices I've left. And I'm like, oh, like story wise, it doesn't make sense that I would have done hours of quest there, but it doesn't. And then it doesn't matter. You show up, and Odin's like, I mean, ironically, Odin pretends not to know that you were gone, because of course he knew you were gone because he's Tyr.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
which I guess maybe repairs the mistake. Anyway, it's uh, uh it's all fine, and even that didn't like affect my enjoyment. It's just it's such an incredibly ambitious thing that they're trying to do, and I think one reason I'm kind of obsessed with that particular way of doing things is I just see us moving more and more in that direction with these big games in particular, where games are going to be more like kind of being a character in a story, and you can make different choices, like um who who's going to be in your party, and how, and then based on who's in your party, you'll see how they react to things, and you'll learn more information about different people, and it sort of does become a different game for each person. Like, it's funny,
Mm-hmm.
you and I, we've talked a lot about the story in the abstract between the two of us, but I'm not sure what side quests you've done and what you haven't, and you're not sure what I've done and what I haven't either, right? And so
Yeah.
like we could actually have some fairly different impressions in our head about some of these side things, which I think is cool. Actually, it's like yeah, we both played the game, but then we can have a conversation. We're like, hey, remember that one thing? And then you'll be like, no, I don't. And then we're like, oh, well, let me tell you about it. Like that's a cool, not new because it's not like that's a new thing in games, but it's a the execution and the way they did it here seems new to me. Yeah.
Yeah. That's gosh, it's really interesting because I don't know how to talk about game story if that's the future. Like it's like in a world where, we have the power to completely render the stuff as you're making choices, right? And like a future world in which choices are constantly dynamic and changing and the game can kind of develop itself as you make those choices. That sounds great to me, but I do think you lose something of the hand of the creator in that a little bit. Like
Mhm.
like I think Cory Barlog is telling a very beautiful, complicated, rich story across these two games. Absolutely. And I wonder, like, on the one hand it excites me, the potential for that. On the other hand, like, I love this game and I love the game before it primarily because I really love these characters and I really love what the writers did with these characters. And I wonder if we lose that, if we move too
Yeah.
far away from that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you have to have a writer who really knows what they're doing, and here I think we do have that. I mean, so
Mhm.
we've talked kind of abstractly up to this point, but I
Yeah, do we
think
want to talk about the
like
actual story?
yeah, like the actual story and the way that it's executed, it is to consistently follow a pretty specific theme. And I thought about it and I tried to articulate it to myself, and what I came up with is how do you live with a mistake that you can't fix? Was how I
Mhm.
how I decided I would phrase the main theme, and I think it's pretty much applies to everybody. Applies to
Yeah.
pretty much literally every character. Um, because the previous game is it's related to mistakes, but it's related to like we're going to make better choices, or we're going to be better, and this is almost a sort of not rebuttal. That's too strong a word, but it's an angle on it where it's like sometimes you've made a choice that's such a bad choice, that's such a damaging choice, that's such a painful choice, and you can't take it back. um there's no out here.
Mhm.
The game ends on a very down note, actually, um depending on what you consider to be the end of the game. And I found that to be really surprising, I guess, especially since the first game left you feeling like really upbeat about things. This one leaves you feeling really kind of sick, honestly.
I
Um,
mean, it left you feeling upbeat about things. Also, it literally said that the end of the world was coming,
that's true. Yeah.
that Ragnarok was on the way. So not totally upbeat, but I get what you mean.
Yeah. You feel like the main plot, which is the Kratos Atreus relationship, is fixed in the
Yes.
first game, and then in this game it's a more kind of wistful, bittersweet, like, and now Atreus is a man and he's going off into the wilds, and that's also somewhat positive. But I mean,
Yeah, I
really,
mean, that's
okay,
just an evolution of the father-son dynamic, right? Eventually the
yes,
son has to go off on his own.
exactly. That's not. I mean, I guess maybe I'm weird and things affected me differently than they affected you, but like, because I'm always a sucker for brother stuff, anything with brothers in fiction.
Sure.
It really gets to me, and so the whole Brock and Sindri thing was it just affected me really powerfully. And so I'll tell you my autobiographical story of how I played this game, which is I
Okay.
I I beat Odin, and then I did the whole thing where Atreus runs through the building and talks to everybody. And then as soon as I got back control of Kratos, I was like, I need to go see if Sindri is ever going to forgive us for this. And like, if is there going to be some like denouement post game content where I can find Sindri? Because it was heartbreaking to me that Sindri is no longer at any of the blacksmithing shops after Brock is killed. He's just gone, and it's the dwarf woman whose name I forgot is there instead. And I'm like, is do we did we really lose Sindri? Like, we really that's so sad to me. That's such a sad thought to me that like which is great because he's like the functional blacksmith merchant NPC, but
Hmm.
he's also this character that we've come to know and love over 2 games. And so as soon as I finished the game, I wasn't done. I was like, I got to figure this. I got to like figure out if we're going to resolve this or if this is just how we're going to leave it off. And then I talked to the dwarves, and the dwarves were like, "Yeah, we're having a funeral for Brock in Svartalfheim." And so I immediately went to Svartalfheim for the funeral. Like maybe Sindri will be there, and we can apologize and we can fix things. Have you done this scene yet? By the way.
I have not. I basically I'll let you continue, but my ending is I beat the game. I did all the thing with Atreus, and then the game kind of made it clear to me that hey, new game end game stuff now. You can go all do and one of the things it said was that, and I immediately said, well, that's the last thing I have to do. If I'm
Mm.
gonna do it, that's the very last thing I have to do, and I put the game down not long after that and have not picked it up yet to finish all that other stuff. So I have not seen that scene. No,
In that case, I kind of don't want to spoil it for you.
I don't care. I don't.
Well, it's a downer, is what it is. It's not.
I'm sure.
It's not Sindri forgiving you. um, Sindri does not show up to the blacksmith shops again after that interaction, and
That does not surprise me at
yeah,
all.
yeah, because that's like the idea of this game is like, no, you and Atreus really like you did harm that can't be rectified. You
Yeah.
can't just say you're sorry and fix this and things will go back to the way they were. It's really in keeping with the themes of the story, but in a way that I just found so heartbreaking. And again, like through the mechanism of the gameplay, that became even more effective. I thought that
It
was.
is pretty astonishing to me that Brock and Sindri are like my favorite characters in this whole game, which is not something
Mhm.
I expected after the first one because I was so in love with the Kratos and Atreus relationship. And it's not like I'm any less in love with it in this game, but like I think they were just so surprising to me that these kind of one off joke characters who like one of them is the obsessive clean one that never likes to get dirty, and the other one's the rough and tumble one that doesn't care as much about that. And it's always a joke that you turn around the corner after having climbed through this labyrinth and puzzle, and they're just there at the workshop somehow. And it's played like they're mostly comedic relief characters.
Mhm.
And then this game said, okay, yes, that, but also this. And
Mhm.
it started that pretty soon in the game, with the reveal that hey, Brock is actually dead,
Mhm.
and he was forcefully resurrected by Sindri, only he's missing a piece of his soul.
Mhm.
And so when he dies this time, if he dies again, he's not only is he not like he's just gone. He's just gonna be gone now because a piece of his soul's gone. And so we're setting up that, and I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. And then the game allows that to play off, allows Brock to discover that in this really wonderful part in the game, and then pays it off with him dying at the end, shockingly dying
Mhm.
when the stupid tear reveal that I honestly, you got me, game, did not see that coming.
No, me
I
neither.
mean, Odin is such a trickster and disguises himself as people all the time in Norse mythology that I should have seen it coming, but I did not. And that was a very, very surprising moment. And then Brock is dead. And yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I think it ties into what you're talking about with the sometimes there's choices you can't come back from, because yeah, Sindri is not just going to immediately forgive you from this, but Sindri did the same thing, right? Sindri made a choice with Brock. He did a thing that was, I guess you could argue, the wrong thing. At least he felt it was wrong enough to keep a secret from his brother
Mhm.
for all these years about that thing. And that's not something he can take back either. And so I think part of what's going on in Sindri's mind, hatred for you, yes, but hatred for himself as well.
Yeah.
He hates himself,
Right.
and it's great stuff. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I love everything having to do with Sindri, and that's like the main thing that sticks in my mind. I mean, we have this list of like 10 characters in front of us, and all of them, I thought it was great, but I keep thinking about the tragedy of Sindri and like the effect of it. I mean, I love how every time you see him after Brock's death, so Sindri's always like perfectly put together, and he's got this gold armor, and he's got these gloves on because he's a hypochondriac. And
Mhm.
everything after that scene, like his hair is wild, his face is this like mask of pain. He's not wearing his gloves at all, and he's just dirty, and he's like still covered in Brock's blood. And it's just like um really using all of the tools of modern gameplay, which includes, basically it's a film that you're immersed in at this point, right?
Mhm.
Um, it was, yeah, it's really, really good, really affecting.
I mean, that's just great stuff, right? You establish him as this neat freak, this germaphobe, this hypochondriac, and then you how do we demonstrate how far he's fallen? Is just throw that character trait away, that he's
Mhm,
so distraught and destroyed that he suddenly doesn't care about that anymore.
mhm,
And it's remarkably effective and heartbreaking and wonderful. I mean, when he shows up again in Asgard with the army behind him, and he's just like in total fuck you mode,
mhm,
where he's like you're happy to see him, the characters are happy to see him, and he's just like, fuck you, I'm here to because I'm gonna kill this guy,
mhm.
but I hate you.
Yeah.
It's just this holy shit moment. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, that's not done really in stories like this very much, and it's
No,
really shocking.
that's why it's sticking with me so much. I think. I mean, it's really. I think the the last moment where you've defeated Odin. You have, you have Mimir and Freya with you, and it's like, man, Freya's arc is it kind of mirrors Kratos' arc in the last
Hmm.
game, which is
Hmm.
like coming to get above this need for vengeance, and to get to be bigger than that, right? To be
Yeah.
the bigger person, to realize that vengeance isn't going to, um she has her terrible mistake that she can't come back from, and her journey is realizing that getting vengeance on Odin, getting vengeance on Kratos, getting vengeance on anyone is not going to bring Baldur back, and it's not going to reverse her mistake. She just has to find a way to live with that. And so, the final scene, you've got Kratos who's changed, Freya who's changed, Atreus, he's changed in different ways. He doesn't have exactly the same story. And
Hmm.
then Sindri has gone the opposite direction. He's become
Yeah.
a vengeful, angry, revenant creature, right? And it's like, and you're like, oh no, this is like, and he kills Odin, and there's like a mild satisfaction there, but you're also like, well, the game has taught me pretty definitively that that was not going to make him feel better, and that was really kind
Yeah.
of the wrong thing to do, actually.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the game is about change too, right? I think you're right that it's about not being able to undo mistakes, but part of part of the concept of making a mistake is that not that you should or want to try to undo it, but that you should learn from it, right? That
Mm,
we learn from our mistakes, and I love this idea that the game presents around the concept of fate. You know, like fate in mythology is this very real, specific thing. You have the fates, like in both Greek and Norse mythology, you have people that are that weave the strings of fate, that tell you what's going to happen. And in this story, our characters visit those three people and are basically told outright by them that there's no such thing as fate, that prophecy is kind of bullshit. It's just predictive modeling. It's
mhm,
just you are so predictable of a person. Your choices are so predictable that we can basically plot out what you're going to do, and then we'll make it look like fate. And so it's this really fascinating thing where, Odin is obsessed with fate. Like, that's one of the things true to Norse mythology, but also very true to this character in this game. He's obsessed with fate. He's obsessed with knowing what's going to happen and doing whatever he can once he's told to do something to try to prevent it. And we see our characters kind of fall into that same trap as well. Unfortunately, they're able to escape from it.
mhm,
And so this idea of change and learning and growing beyond all these things is so reticent. And then, yeah, you have a character like Sindri who just does not do any of that, who just exists in the exact opposite way. And the interesting thing is, I don't know where they go with that from here. Like, what does that look like? Like, I don't think Sindri is going to become like the antagonist of the trilogy, right? I don't think that's where we're going with it. But it is really interesting to think about, okay, where do we go with that character from now? Like,
yeah.
are we going to see him come back? Is that going to be part of it? I don't, it doesn't feel like that from this game, right? It feels like that's contrary to some of the messaging we're trying to have here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure, because um it feels like we kind of already did that with Freya.
Yeah,
Like at the
sure.
end of the last game, I would not have predicted that Freya becomes an ally, but I do think this game pulled it off. Like you establish rapport and trust with her, and she comes to understand Kratos better than she had, and work through some of her own issues and so forth.
Mhm,
So like it's
mhm.
not impossible, but it's like I also don't. Yeah, I think I wouldn't want to see just like the same thing done again, except now with Sindri. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of what makes me excited about it as an idea is I don't really know what to do with it.
sure,
I
sure.
like what you said about Fate a lot because I was for a lot of the game I was kind of confused about what we were doing with Fate. I was honestly like, oh, this old tired theme,
Right, yeah,
fate and predestination, most boring thing. And the fact is, like, you and I talk about this theme a lot because it's in a lot of different works. And so I'm just like, oh yeah, fate, my old friend. um but what you just said is absolutely right, where it's like it's not like fate is a separate theme off to the side. It's literally just this idea of you're what I said about like how do you how do you get past a mistake that you've made. It's like, well, one of the things that you do is you stop making the same goddamn mistake,
yeah,
and the only way to do that is to change.
mhm,
And that's what that's what the whole fates thing is about. Is it's like, yeah, you're damned to keep making the same mistakes unless you can change, which is really hard to do. I mean, that's the tragedy of the Thor character. Is
yeah,
which by the way is a thing that if we had several hours to talk about this game, I would want to spend at least one of them talking about Thor, because he is again similar to Kratos in a lot of ways, where he's made terrible mistakes and terrible choices, and he's like just barely started to try to be better, but he doesn't have any faith in himself, and his family has faith in him, but he doesn't have enough faith in himself. And he has this son of a bitch Odin standing over him who's really pushing all of his buttons and manipulating him.
yeah.
And then he does make the right choice at the last minute, and it's not enough. It's too little too late, basically. And it's really sad, actually. Like I love the whole character of Thor in this game. I think it's really really good.
Really good, and I think another important, theme that is tying into all this thing is the concept of parenthood and, the parent-child relationship, right? This is a huge thing in the first game between Kratos and Atreus and how that was reflected in Freya and Balder. And then in this game, once again, we have Odin and Thor, father and son, and then we have Thor and Thrud, father and daughter.
Mm.
And she is really one of his impetuses for change at the end. It is through kind of watching his daughter's experience with Atreus, his daughter kind of trying to shine a light on things, trying to make it clear to him, and as you said, his daughter's support of him, that is what allows Thor to get to a point where he can change. And so there's this really interesting dynamic here going on, much more than just father son like in the first game, but just parent child. And we see, with Kratos and Atreus, they learn from each other, they change each other, they better each other. I think Freya, her son is dead, but she is able to learn and change from her experiences with Balder, understanding the mistakes she made, and eventually overcoming those mistakes. And then we have, Thor and his child, and then Odin learns nothing from his child, right? Odin
Mhm.
cannot learn anything from his child, and Odin teaches nothing to his child, and that's why Thor really is this tragic character who can't provide any learning to his father and can't receive any learning from his father, and that really is tragic. But the silver lining here is he's able to impart that on his daughter. So his generation, I guess, there's hope there,
Mhm.
and I think that's really cool, and it's really interesting the way all these things we're talking about kind of tie together nicely and bring in those themes from the first game that we love so much. Take those ideas and elevate on them and escalate on them and explore them weaved amongst all these other things. It's really remarkable storytelling. It really is.
Yeah, exactly. I like what you just said about Odin, because he he's doing everything he can to escape fate, but only externally. And
Mhm.
ironically, the one thing that could get him to escape the fate of Ragnarok is if he just stopped being such a murderous asshole and turning everyone against him, which
Uh-huh.
is what causes them to want to kill him in the first place. But
Yep.
he can't change. He doesn't even consider it. Actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry, go
So
ahead. Go
no,
ahead.
he wants to control everything else, but
Mhm.
he can't realize that it's himself that he needs to actually change,
Yeah.
which is great.
The thing I was going to say is I love, like, we talked about kind of the boring, tired exploration of fate, and even the idea even the idea that by trying to best fate, you're in essence guaranteeing your fate, is a pretty used, worn trope at this point, right?
Hmm.
That's one of the more common explorations of fate. I mean, there's literally there's literally a part in this game where Mimir is teaching you the story of Beowulf, which is or
Hmm.
not Beowulf, sorry, Macbeth,
Macbeth, yeah.
which is like one of the OG damning yourself to fate by trying to beat
Hmm.
fate stories. um and it's great because, again, it's not necessarily that, oh, just this is what fate has in store for you and it's inescapable. It's just that you're not learning anything. It's,
Hmm.
again, it's not fate, it's not prophecy, it's just choice. At the end
Yeah,
of the day, it's just choice.
yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's the beat that is hit over and over again in this game, is this idea that, like, we will, even if we do something that fate has said we're going to do, we're doing it because this is our choice, we're doing it because this is what we want, this is what we feel is right. Right. And so we don't allow ourselves to be slaves to that idea, and that's how the characters are able to eventually overcome in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, not all of them,
Yeah.
but
I mean, it's interesting because I think some of this was so subtle that I did have to kind of think back on things and parse it out for it to make sense. Because like when uh when Kratos kills Heimdall, I was like, there he goes, playing right into the hands of fate. He's being the god killer, just like he always has been. He's making the same choices again. And but then I think the game diverges after that point, or that the story does, and he starts making different choices, or maybe what you just said is what applies there. And it's like, well, yeah, he does kill Heimdall, but it's not because he's the revenging monster.
yeah,
It's because Heimdall needed to die for a number of reasons.
right.
Um, uh,
Because when we start fucking with fate, we get into all this, like, weird technical things. Where we're like, oh shit, I didn't do it for the bad reason, but I still did the thing that the things were going to say I was going to do, so
mhm,
I'm doomed.
mhm.
And then actually, when you listen to what the fates are telling him, you're like, wait a minute, no, that's not true.
Yeah,
Just because someone said you were going to do something and you do it doesn't mean you're a slave to your prophecy.
yeah. No, that I don't remember the exact wording right now, but I do remember like thinking back on the wording of what the Norns said and being like,
Hmm.
that was very cleverly done, because
Yeah.
it encompasses basically, yeah, it's good.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
there's one nitpick I have. Actually, I think I can just call this like a personal pet peeve of storytelling with me personally, where um if you make me suspicious that there's something off, or that there's like a traitor or something, then it really messes with my ability to connect to the story straightforwardly. So, and it's funny because now I don't remember what I was thinking when, but I definitely at some point, middle-ish game, maybe even earlier than that, I started feeling like something's off. There's somebody is a traitor, and I think at different times I thought maybe the traitor was Freya, and it's just like her about face wasn't actually genuine, and she was still planning to kill us because we killed her son. Or I was thinking maybe Mimir, because there again, weird word choices made me think like, wait a minute, when the Norns say that he served Odin until he was put in the tree, is that like until inclusive or until exclusive? Like, does he still serve Odin? And like, is Odin going to give him back his body if he listens or whatever? Um, Ironically, I think the one character that I didn't particularly suspect was Tyr, because I'm an idiot. But all of this kind of did distance me from the story in ways that I wish I hadn't been distanced from, because
That's interesting.
suspecting Mimir of stuff, it's like, no, Mimir's great. Being suspicious of him is just like a distraction. I don't know. Did you experience any of this at all, or was I being a weirdo?
No, I mean, this is why, like, people talk to us about our close readings and stuff, and I say I only notice things when I'm specifically doing a close reading, because I was just happily playing along in this game, not thinking anything was up, just totally content, in my enjoyment of the game, and then boom, tear. And I was like, what the fuck that you say? You stupidly didn't realize that I had no fuck. I wasn't even thinking about the idea that someone in this place was not who they said they were.
Mm-hmm.
I was just happily enjoying my game, and none of it occurred to me at all.
Yeah, the one thing the other thing I can say about Mimir is that, like, I think at two different times in the like interstitial dialogue, a character like contradicts a story that Mimir had told us in the details, where well, like, one of them is Odin says that he lost his eye by looking into the portal,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not Mimir's story. And I think actually, so like, this is what's kind of great actually about the whole Odin thing. We haven't talked much about Odin. Like, Odin is a great world class level, like, manipulator character.
Sure.
Like, you can study the way they write his scenes, where just as he's talking to Atreus, he's employing like 15 different rhetorical techniques and distractions, and, you know, different ways of cajoling and making offers, and making sort of like something that seems like a compromise, but he's not really offering you anything actually, and just outright lies.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it begins to kind of affect you as the player, because for me anyway, I was like, well, maybe Mimir is lying to turn you against Odin, and like, maybe Odin's not. I never really took this seriously because obviously Odin's a villain, but I was like, maybe they're going to do the thing where it turns out that Odin is just right actually, and Mimir has been unfairly trying to turn you against him. And I was like, that would be. I don't think they're going to do that, but that would be kind of interesting and shocking.
I never bought into that much, but I do think there's a lot of interesting things there between Mimir and Odin, where like the game wants to gesture you towards like, I mean, I think one of the themes of this game is like not everything is like the stories we're told, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
we learn about, like, that's, I think, the big thing with the dark elves and the light elves is this idea that like you enter a place and you see a situation and you like decide that one side is right and the other side is wrong, and in actuality there's no clear answer on that. And you know, a lot of the stories we tell of mythology, I mean, Mir is a storyteller, and perhaps he doesn't have every single angle of every single story and understand everything exactly correctly. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that Odin's a good guy, no, but a lot of the stuff is more complicated, because I think in the end Odin, to me, like, I don't think he's good. I do think he's really tragic too.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's, you know, like, talking about this father son dynamic, he seems to me like stuck in this perpetual state of childishness. You know, he never grew up a little. He's still obsessed with this one idea and this one thought, and he's so all consumed with it that he can't see anything else. And yes, he's a master manipulator and played just mwah, by Richard Schiff. I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
the performance of the fucking year, man.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Schiff, it's such a weird choice. I never would have imagined Odin looking the way this game made Odin look.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously talking this way, and the way Richard Schiff portrays him, I never would have thought that for this Norse god, but it just works and it's so great. But I
Yeah.
don't know. I feel bad for Odin. I feel bad for, you know, the end of the game is Loki decides to destroy this mask, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see Odin's like distraught reaction to that, because this was the thing that he decided was worth everything, that
Mm-hmm.
was worth his family, was worth happiness, was worth any potential for anything, and he's just decided that all of that is worth disposing of just to get this simple answer to understand the world.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the lessons of this thing, to tie back to your thing of like the mistakes you make, and you can't control the world, you can't like, sometimes the world is beyond understanding, sometimes bad shit happens and it's beyond understanding and we can't undo it. People die sometimes, you
Yeah.
know, and your quest to understand the why of that can destroy you.
Yeah, I mean, while I do think that Odin just probably was lying to himself in a big way, I think there
Sure.
might be some credence to what he says, where he's like, if I had got access to these secrets, I could have fixed everything. I could have made everything better. And that's speaking to the idea of the false belief that you can actually fix the mistakes you've made. Like you're gonna fix the fact that you wiped out the giants to keep them from threatening you
Yeah.
somehow. Like no,
Yeah.
like that's you made the wrong choice. Like
Yeah, and he's kind of practicing a sort of sunk cost fallacy, isn't
mm,
he? Like this
mm,
idea that like you make one choice, one bad choice, and justify it via getting this answer, and now every choice you make from this point on, you have to keep moving towards that thing, because if you turn back now, if you change now, it means that every single thing you've done to get to this point was terrible and wrong and bad.
mm,
And so you've got yourself in this position where you always have to be driving forward. You can't ever relent, because that means you were wrong, and that means that was the wrong thing to do, and that means that you're bad.
yeah.
You can't let that happen.
I want to apply that exact thing to Thor too, where he's
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um just the most fascinating interpretation of Thor ever, where he has murdered all of the giants, but he's half giant. And I even in the first game, I was like, well, how does that work exactly? And it's basically works incredibly sadly because I mean, not to take any responsibility away from Thor in the story, but like he's basically doing this to get his father's love,
Yeah.
and his father evidently hates giants pretty categorically and wants to wipe out the giants, and sees Thor basically, it never says it out loud, but it's like he seems to just hate Thor because Thor's a giant.
Yeah.
And like I think Heimdall is the one who communicates this the most transparently, that like Odin's never gonna really give opportunities to Thrud because she's a quarter giant and she's tainted in this way. And so Thor is like this self-hating figure where, like you said, the sunk cost fallacy, like he's like, I guess this is what I am. I'm a monster who
Yeah.
kills people for Odin, and if I ever stop doing that, then I have to like take responsibility for my choices in order to stop, and that's too painful of a thought, so I'm just going to
Mm-hmm.
keep going.
Yeah. It's really sad when you put it in that light. It really is. Gosh, Thor. How I just did not think this game was gonna make me care that much about fucking Thor.
Yeah.
It's so
I mean,
good.
I was, I thought the first fight with Thor was very fun. Like it reminds you of the Baldur fight in the first
Mm-hmm,
game,
mm-hmm.
where you're like, it's exciting and fun, and Thor is, first of all, it's just dynamically a fun gameplay fight, right? It's just, I still adore the moment where you're fighting and then you die and it goes to the death screen, and you're like, oh, I didn't think he got me, and then he's like, oh no, you don't, and it shocks you back to life. You're like, oh shit. This
Yeah.
is great. I love
It's
this.
such a great. I mean, we haven't talked about the gameplay much on this show at all, but yeah, the fun all around. And I think there's a good point to that, the idea that it mirrors the Baldur fight, because I think that is one thing the game is kind of doing at the beginning, is it's very intentionally echoing the beats of the first game and
Mhm.
reminding you of those beats and kind of lulling you into the game, and then it makes the twists and turns. Like in the first game, you didn't go looking for Tyr per se, but you were like following in the footsteps of Tyr for a lot of the beginning parts of that game, right? In
Mhm.
order to
Mhm.
get the whatever the thing that allows you to travel between the realms, to get that thing activated, you're like following Tyr and learning about Tyr. In this game, no, we're just gonna go get Tyr.
Mhm.
So I think it is intentionally echoing a lot of the beats of that game at the beginning, and then it veers in really interesting ways from there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's interesting, just narrative wise. Like, it's interesting how much of the game is you following along while Atreus makes decisions that even at the time seem questionable.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like if that's done wrong, then that's really frustrating, because you can be like, wow, it's really annoying to watch this, to watch the main character be an idiot. But the game is so explicitly about this idea of like a young man just has to make his own mistakes. That's part of growing up. That's part of life, that you kind of accept it. And I will say, I think I'm not sure if you agree with me. I think you agree with me that like the transition back and forth between Kratos and Atreus was sometimes um, awkward. Like, especially the first time that I was playing as Atreus, I was just like, I don't like this. I want to go back to the guy who I've been playing for a game and a half, and who I know how
Yeah.
to play really well.
It's such an interesting choice that has such a poor track record in video games, a poor track record of response in video games.
Mhm.
I mean, I think one of the ones I'm thinking of is the world famous Metal Gear Solid 2 Fake Out, where that game starts, you think you're going to be Solid Snake, and then after the first 2 hours, it's like, psych, you're this new guy riding, and everyone at once cries in anguish. We're like, no, we wanted to be Snake. He's the cool one. And I think that's a very similar thing happens here, where like Kratos is so integral, and Kratos gameplay and the blades of Athena and now the Leviathan axe are such integral parts of God of War that's this ripping you away from that perspective and into this other character who, yeah, quite frankly, especially the first time you play as him, sucks big one.
Uh-huh.
He's so useless in combat. I hate it so much.
Yeah.
But I think that is part of it. And I think you're absolutely right that a big part of this game is watching people make bad choices, having the controller in your hand, doing those bad choices, and yet also being powerless to stop them. I think
Mhm.
it puts you very firmly in the mindset of a father, whose child has advanced beyond adolescence into adulthood and needs to be free to make their own choices, even if they're the wrong ones, needs to get that freedom to make the bad choice, and knowing that it's the bad choice, but you can't step in, you can't stop them, you have to let them learn those lessons on their own. I think it's really really great, actually.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I mean, I think you could even argue that like the unpleasantness of playing as Atreus for the first time is intentionally putting you into the space of like empathizing with this character who is weaker than
Yeah,
Kratos.
no, definitely, yeah.
Um, and I beat the game on the highest difficulty, which is part of the reason why it took me so long. I'm not even like bragging about like, oh, because I'm such a badass. It's like, no, I just died a lot, but I wanted to do it. And particularly as Atreus, you're just like, oh my god, these arrows do nothing.
Hmm.
This is useless. What and but and then you do get stronger as Atreus as the game goes on, so that's also kind of cool and satisfying. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you get to turn into a fucking wolf. That's pretty awesome.
turn into a wolf. I mean, honestly, that makes a huge difference. Like when that's one of those places where like story and gameplay really are just, there's a beautiful marriage there, because it takes Atreus from having really very few tools to suddenly having this new very powerful tool that can be used strategically to get you out
Yeah.
of rough situations. And that's, to me, that's the strength of God of War gameplay, is having a variety of tools. And even if you're really stuck on a fight, like which happened to me constantly, I would be like, okay, let me stop and think about this. Like, what is the problem here? Okay, maybe I need to use the realm shift, time dilation magic instead of the Bifrost magic, so that I can like get out of this situation that I'm in. Like the problem isn't that I'm not killing them fast enough. The problem is that I'm like getting ganged up on. So like you think tactically and then you use your options. Atreus didn't have as many options, and then as he gets
Hmm.
more options, you're like, okay, yes, I get it, right?
Yeah.
And it's interestingly different. Like the wolf is both similar to and different from the rage mode in certain ways, in ways that feel
Yeah.
satisfying.
Yeah, plus you get really cool cutscenes where he and Dada uh, go bear mode, and
Yes.
the team attack when the camera like spins around them when when Loki is in bear mode, and
Uh-huh.
and Kratos. It's just so, it's like so kind of silly and wonderful. It made me laugh out loud when the camera does this like extra spin flourish around giant bear with his dad next to him. I really loved it.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's great. I mean, and then there's only the one part in the game when you actually get to control the bear in the usual way,
Mhm.
which again, that's like it's like a interesting moment, because it's really satisfying, but also like Sindri's right there, and so you're not like, yeah, you're like, Sindri's still so mad at me. So it's like it's another like, it's not quite bittersweet, but it's like, I feel complicated about this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
I'm so fascinated about where they go from here, because I believe they've said they've not officially announced the third game, but I believe they said the plan here is a trilogy, right? So There's definitely going to be at least one more game exploring this. I really wish they would commit to the bit, and the third game is titled God of Mischief. I think that would be awesome.
Mm.
It's never going to happen. There's too much money involved for them to ever kind of uh, make the waters murky. They're going to stick to the IP and they're going to call it God of War, like, of course. But I think that would be really cool because it allows you to see this really natural trilogy happen here, right? Where the first game is centered mostly on Kratos, and while Atreus is an important player, it is mostly about how Kratos changes over the course of that game. Embraces fatherhood, learns how to be a father, learns how to be a person, and then the second game is kind of this transition period where they're both learning from each other. But I think more important than Kratos's arc over the second game is Atreus's arc. I
Yeah.
think that would be fair to say.
Yeah.
And then the third game is just fully the Atreus game. I think that just makes logical sense.
I agree. I mean, I think this is the problem, the always perennial problem of serialized storytelling is, okay, we finished this character's arc, now what? And then you just make up some new shit, and it's always like,
Yeah.
really? Like, that's like I felt really satisfied with what we did, and now we're like you're messing with it.
Sure.
And honestly, yeah, like I don't think it's a criticism of the game to say that Kratos is one of the least dynamic characters in this game.
Mhm.
He definitely does. There's a lot of great Kratos moments in the game, but like he actually starts out this game very like he's not the Kratos even from the end of the last game. He's
Yeah.
like softer spoken and reasonable and patient with his son. And like even when he loses his patience with Atreus in this game, he pretty quickly is like, okay, like I get it. I need to give you your space. It's not really a game about this horrible conflict between father and son.
Yeah.
It's not. And so yeah, Kratos is kind of arced out, which is
It's
sad.
fine.
It's kind of fine. It's just like maybe we need to move on,
Yeah.
like you were saying actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think the arc that he does have in this game, to the extent that he does, is almost a backsliding arc where
Mm.
we kind of see him almost fall back into old habits and then is fortunately able to recover himself before he fully slides into those things and is
Mhm.
kind of back to where he was at the beginning by the end of the game, which I think works very well because this is another great thing to talk about with change. This idea that change is not like a light switch. You don't just change and now you're this new person. You change, you overcome, you make different choices, and you feel like you're a different better person. And then you're you know come up against a conflict or a scenario in which the old person that you were has a really good solution to this, and you want to fall back into that. And I think the fact that Kratos successfully resists that is what his arc needs to do. I think that's very clever. It's done very well, and it's done in a way that I think escapes from exactly what you were talking about, which is the let's invent a new problem for Kratos so he can have a new arc.
Mm.
The problem with sequels. So yeah, I mean, I would love nothing more than to kind of move away from him in a much more explicit manner in a follow-up game. Although I think
Yeah.
we fall under the art versus commerce
Mhm.
problem that we perennially have in these games that take 5 years to produce and millions and millions and millions of dollars. They need to do what's the most safe for the franchise, which means we need to have Kratos on the cover. It needs to be called God of War. We need to do these things. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because he's like sort of not even the God of War anymore, right?
No, he's not.
Except sort of in the sense that Tyr was the God of War, where it's like, well, war includes like peace, if you think about
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
No, and what you just said about Kratos kind of backsliding, it's like even that is successfully tied into the ideas of this story, where it's often the other people around us who are able to help us change. Like
Yeah.
that's a consistent thing throughout all of this as well. Kratos is able to help Freya change and and family, the importance of family, the importance of others. And I'd love the moment where Kratos basically, kind of lays it out like, son, without you around to kind of temper me, I kind of started to slide into my old habits. And then they were like, and Loki, is like, hey, without you around, um, I was making a lot of chaotic, bad choices. And they're like, okay, well, let's agree that we'll always have the other's voice inside of our head to help guide us. I just thought that was a beautiful sort of parenting moment. It kind of it
Yeah.
reminded me of, forgetting the face of your father, and so forth, where it's like, yeah, like that is how we help each other, and how we grow as people, is you realize, you realize your mistakes, and you rely on others to help you kind of shift into a new way of being.
Yeah.
um
No, 100%.
Love that.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
as we wrap up here, can I get on a soapbox for just a minute?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with the storytelling in this game and has everything to do with the gameplay,
Okay.
which is we need to move away from the PlayStation 4 now. um this is a game that came out on the PS5, but
Uh-huh.
also for very understandable reasons. The PS5 is still somewhat of a rare commodity. There are not too many of them. There are still, caused by the pandemic and other reasons, there are still shortages of supply, and so I completely understand a company doesn't want to fully commit to a console when there are so few of them out there. But man, I am sick of the squeezing through tunnels to hide load screens. I'm
Hmm.
sick of the intricate doors that we have this full, reach down and open door animation to hide load screens. I'm just sick of all this stuff. Like, if I had to, while playing this game, walk through one more tight corridor that our character has to squeeze through, I was gonna go insane. I'm so sick of it. And I know once we get to the fully PS5, it's brand new technology called flash memory will allow us to have
Uh-huh.
load speeds sufficient enough to where we don't have to design around those things. And it's going to be so great, and I can't wait. And I just wish it was here because I wanted this to be a next gen experience, and that is the type of stuff that really prevented it from being a next gen experience for me.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. I was perhaps I was delusional on some level, but I was expecting, I knew we were going to have a big Ragnarok battle at the end of the game. And in my head, I was like imagining what that was going to be like. And I was imagining just like basically armies clashing, and then you being Kratos wading into the midst of clashing armies. And like,
Yeah.
I was like, how are they going to do this? And it's like, oh, it's just like every other level in the game, actually. It's just you're
Yeah.
moving between different like small platforms with, 3 to 7 enemies on it. And it's,
Yeah, and
and
rock
it's,
formations around all parts of it except for one very small thing, so you can load the next area while unloading this
yeah.
area. And
And
yeah.
one obvious exit, one obvious entrance, which
Mhm,
again,
mhm.
none of that. I wasn't like, oh no. I was just like, oh okay, yeah. I guess that's that's how they have to do it.
Yeah.
Um, one just the I don't even want to say this, but like there were bugs. There were a few important bugs that bugged me. Well, one of the worst one was in the Ragnarok battle. There's like a scripted event where like a dragon flies overhead, and it shoots fire, and the fire like blows up some wood that's blocking the ramp up to the next thing. And for whatever reason, the the wood didn't get blown up or burned or whatever. So I'm just, and also like the way into this platform is not accessible anymore. So I was just like running around in circles on this platform, like looking for like where's the circle icon that gets me out of here for like 5 minutes, and while Ragnarok is raging all around me. And I'm finally like, I think something glitched, and so I
Yeah.
just reloaded from save. And it's like that's the kind of thing that really saps the momentum from literally the climax of a story.
I didn't
um
have that happen there, but I did have that, not that exact bug, but a similar bug that basically required a hard reset and reload from
mhm.
a save in order to get out of. So yeah, I mean, I think that's something that the game definitely had problems with. I think as these games get more complicated, like it just becomes more increasingly hard to suss out every single bug. I guess the advantage here is that in an interconnected world, like they can patch those bugs out, whereas
Mhm.
the games of old, sorry, that's on the cartridge. There's nothing we can
Yeah,
do. It's good to be on there forever.
right. Or imagine if it had been a bug that you couldn't just load from save, you were just screwed, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's funny that a similar thing happened on my son's game too. He in Muspelheim actually was stuck and had to reload. So
yeah. It just randomly happens.
yeah.
I don't know exactly how. Just too many systems trying to interact with each other, and sometimes stuff breaks, and you can't test for every single case.
Yeah. It is funny how like this is the more high tech game and it has substantially more bugs, but it's like okay, well that it's also more complicated, so
Yep.
why
Yep.
not?
Yep.
Um,
Okay. So anything else you wanted to talk about Ragnarok? I realized we haven't talked about the character of Angerboda at all,
yeah.
which is interesting because it's a pretty big part of the story. I think it's also perhaps the reason I have specifically avoided it is because it's the part of the story I know what to do with the least.
Mhm.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I think the reason we haven't talked about it is it's the most disconnected. You know, it almost feels like one of these side quests where it's not pertaining to the main theme that we've been talking about this whole time. Really,
Hmm.
it's 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 the Loki story, which is um you know it's about the struggles of a young man to grow up in the shadow of his father, which is a kind of an entirely new thing that this game is just kind of throwing in here. And it's not that I didn't like it, and it's not that I wasn't into it. It's just I was focused on the other story. I was focused on Kratos, and I was focused on these themes of choice and redemption and all this.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, I mean, I thought the vocal performance for Angerboda was great.
Oh yeah.
Um,
No, she's wonderful.
like it was I like just the idea that you know Atreus gets to kind of be a kid for a while, and like that's the, I don't want to be reductive and say like there is no point to that part of the game, but it sort of is like there is no point to that part of the game. It's just Atreus gets to be a kid, which he never
Yeah.
gets to do because he knows like four people and one of them is a head, and he knows no other children, and this is like the first other person his age that he's met, and he just gets to go collect plants, and it's I'm probably not doing it justice really because I'm sure that it does connect to the themes better because there is the fate angle and the giants and fate and all of that.
Yeah, I
um
mean, definitely Angerboda is a character that is kind of like obsessed with fate in a similar way to a lot of our other characters, and is
mhm,
like the entire time with Loki, kind of mourning the fact that he's about to leave her, never to return, which we see is just not actually how things work at all. But
mhm,
it's like, you know, perhaps she could have enjoyed the moment. This is this beautiful, blissful moment. She could have enjoyed it a little better if she wasn't thinking the whole time about, oh, I know for a fact that this is about to end.
mhm. Thinking
Um,
about the future, right? That I mean that's kind of a cool thought. The idea that like old old people who have made lots of mistakes think about fate and time and choice in one way, and young people who have yet to make any mistakes think about fate and choice in a really a totally different way. Um, I mean, I could empathize with both of those characters in their like I want to live up to my destiny and you know or like you know I want to avoid this particular bad outcome and these things where neither of them have made these terrible mistakes that they need to atone for
mhm.
yet, and so they're thinking about choice in this more like proactive way
Sure.
rather than like you know how do I obtain redemption. It's more like how do I live up to my destiny or how do I you know save the giants or whatever heroic mission. um Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's really quite Byzantine, like in terms
Mhm.
of the complexity of all these storylines, and I'm really
Yeah.
really impressed with it, and had a great time with the game.
Me too. Me too. Great game. Anything else?
I like the spear.
The speed. I expected to hate it. Like in a game, like here's honestly what I thought with the spear. The blades of chaos are such an iconic God of War weapon, right? Like they're
Mhm,
the one in the original God of War. They're the one you start with, and that those games have always given you more weapons over time. But I thought the first games, like choice to you don't actually start with that, here you have this axe, was such a risky one because I'm like, you're gonna fuck with the best weapon in video games, really?
mhm,
That's an exaggeration, but and then the Leviathan axe was so cool and so good and so fun, and
mhm,
then you got the blades of chaos later and it's like, this is perfect, I see exactly why you did this now, this is perfect. And then this game comes in and says, I'm gonna give you a new weapon,
mhm.
and my reaction was like, man, fuck y'all. I got my axe and I got my blades and I'm good. I don't need this thing. And honestly, the first time you use it, it's kind of like, eh.
Mm-hmm.
But I buffed this thing up and it's fucking awesome. I love it so much. It's so great.
The runics are very satisfying. It's
Mhm.
faster. I think it's faster than either of the other two weapons, which is really useful in some situations, like when you're hemmed in by a lot of enemies.
Yep.
And the throwing mechanic also ends up being pretty convenient when you're just trying to deal with certain situations. And yeah, overall, I agree. Where I was like, am I really going to choose to use this weapon when I have like spent so many hours mastering the other two? And the answer is yeah. Actually, I used it quite a bit. So
I did too. I in fact, it became my like go-to first weapon as I cycled through my runics. It was usually the one that I started with.
That's great.
Yeah, so good game. We'll meet again here in 5-ish years and talk about the third one.
To play God of Mischief: Sands of Egypt.
Oh my god.
as Loki battles the set.
Leaves the Norse gods behind and heads to Egypt. All right, I mean, the world is their oyster. They can do anything they want.
They can.
And,
I'm sure.
And honestly, I would trust it. I would trust it.
Me too.
Doof. All right, Matt. Before we leave for the week, I need to talk to you about something in a section I'm calling "God Damn It, Star Wars."
Yeah, this is it.
God damn it.
At least monthly section of the podcast now.
So, it's NFL playoffs right now, and one of the things that I didn't even realize it while I was watching the playoff game on Monday night was that they were going to reveal the first trailer for Mandalorian season 3 during the playoffs. So I was sitting there and suddenly TV said world premiere Mando season 3. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm excited. And I turned it on and I was enjoying the trailer. But then I was saying to myself, you know what? There's a lot of Baby Yoda in this trailer. Considering the emotional arc of the second season was the Mandalorian leaving behind Baby Yoda and going off on his own, he's hanging out with this little Yoda guy a lot in this trailer. And so I took to Twitter and I was like, is Mando season 3 just going to immediately reverse the end of the beautiful, like, profound arc of Mando season 2? And you know what happened, Matt?
What happened, Scott?
Someone immediately replied and said, no, they already did that in the Book of Boba Fett. So I knew, or had been told, that the second half of the Book of Boba Fett basically becomes like Mando season 2.5. But I naively and stupidly thought what that meant is it was just a continuation of the Mandalorian storyline and not just psych, Yoda's back. But apparently I haven't watched Book of Boba Fett and I'm not going to do it because I watched the first episode and I said, this sucks and I'm not watching it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I refuse to watch it on principle. So this is stupid. I am so mad about this. I probably shouldn't be as mad about this as I am, but this is fucking stupid that there are going to be people that aren't as connected to the internet as I am that are going to boot up Mandalorian season 3 and find that Baby Yoda's with Mando again and go, wait, wasn't there that whole Luke fucking Skywalker bit in the last episode that we watched? What happened? And you know what they're going to do, Matt? They're going to do a stupid previously on thing, and they're just going to show a bunch of sequences from Book of fucking Boba Fett. I'm so mad. Be mad with me, Matt. Be mad.
I am mad. I hate this sort of thing. It actually does annoy me when this is why I never quite get into these like massive universe type storytelling things as much as some people, because I'm like, I want a story. And if you have made a little oxbow of your story where I have to go over there and read that book to understand why this character did this thing that is actually dramatically important, you have lost me, actually, especially if it's not actually like good. Like if it's good, mm-hmm. if it's like all good stuff, I'm like, okay, fine, it's good stuff. But that never happens. And Book of Boba Fett was bad. I didn't finish it. I didn't see the episodes where this reversal of the dramatic arc of season 2 happened. Even after I heard that Luke Skywalker is literally in the Book of Boba Fett, I was like, I expect that to be disappointing, so I'm not going to expose myself to this, because despite the shitty CGI, I liked 90% of the execution of Luke showing up at the end of Mando season 2. So
I
I
did
was
too.
and I was like, great, that was cool. Oh, you're gonna do more. You're just gonna shove more Luke Skywalker in there because you fuckers like Luke. Here he is. No, I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to see mashing the action figures together
Yeah.
in a masturbatory fashion. So we're not gonna. I don't care. I'm not gonna watch it. I'm not gonna go back and watch it because it's insulting to me now. And so the choice is like, oh, so the show that I was invested in, Mandalorian, which I liked, and I guess still like, you have now just like clipped out important dramatic content, and then you're just expecting me to just be okay with that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, fuck you.
And it's one thing, like, this isn't the first time that Disney properties have done this, right? A lot of the Marvel stuff is, I think if you had not watched WandaVision and you pick up with the Scarlet Witch character in Doctor Strange, you might be a little confused about what the fuck's going on with her, right? Not the first time that this has happened at all, but I think this is such a reversal of what the end of the arc of the season was, that to do it in a show that is not called Mandalorian is ridiculous. And I'm gonna say it, in a post Andor world, fuck this show. I don't need it anymore. I don't
Yeah.
need it. I have Andor and I have This Is My Star Wars shit, and I don't need to watch The Mandalorian anymore. And that's sad because, in a pre-Andor world, we were in love with The Mandalorian for good reason. It was an entertaining show that like gave us a reason to be positive about Star Wars again for the first time in a while. And I was glad for it, and I enjoyed my time with it. But my I guess where I finish with this is, I think my time with this show might be coming to an end, because I just, and maybe to play, I guess, the charitable viewer, maybe they did it in a very emotionally satisfying way and it didn't feel like a complete betrayal of the arc. Kind of doubt it. But so maybe I will boot up the first episode of Mando season 3 and be like, yes, this feels fair. This feels earned. I like this. It's possible. It's possible.
It's possible. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because perhaps this is entirely unreasonable, but like, Andor was so perfectly executed that it actually makes Mando seem shabby by comparison. Because I'm thinking about those shitty Robert Rodriguez directed episodes.
Yep.
Where I was like, okay, that was at least like one or two episodes where I was like, that was bad.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like that. I will tolerate it because I have liked a lot of the other episodes of Mandalorian. But now I'm like, why would I tolerate a bad episode? Just make all the episodes good. Don't hire Robert Rodriguez again, idiot. Seriously, like you have so much money to throw at this, and you can do Andor. You fucked up, Disney, because you showed me that you can do Andor. So now you have to do that good going forward.
That was your mistake, you fuckers.
Yeah.
You could always say, no one can make a perfect television show. Oh, well, you did it.
Yeah.
So now my level of expectation is up here now. That was your mistake. You should have made 2 stinker episodes in that series.
Yeah, you should have given me at least one Robert Rodriguez directed episode of Mandalorian.
Oh, poor Robert Rodriguez. He deserves it all.
He does.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess I've flipped back and forth about whether I'm even going to bother watching this thing when it comes out. I think if I'm being honest with myself, I will probably check out the first episode out of a morbid curiosity. But man, just incredibly pissed off that this whole thing is even a thing. That this is what we're doing with storytelling now.
Yeah, I agree. Me too. I will probably watch it as well, honestly, because I like Pedro Pascal.
Yeah,
and I like
I do too.
the character, and we'll see. We'll see.
You know what else you should watch Pedro Pascal in? The Last of Us on HBO.
Has that started? Have you
Yeah, I
watched it?
watched the first
And
episode.
is it good? Because I have not really heard anything about it one way or the other.
It's very good. It's
Okay.
very, very, very good. I mean, there's one sequence that they basically recreated the sequence from the game,
Hmm.
like exactly, which is really fascinating. But it has this new opening to it, that is just one of the creepiest things. Like, I don't want to spoil it, but it's a very, very solid adaptation, and I think people that are not really into video games, I think it's going to be really interesting because I think people that are not really into video games are going to watch this thing and just be like, oh, this is just another like really good zombie show. I've seen a lot of these, but this seems to be another good one. And then I don't know how the worlds are going to mesh between those people and the people that have played and love the game like me and kind of know exactly what's coming. I don't know. I think we'll see. It's interesting because I know where the story goes, and that's very exciting for me. And it's obviously doing very well. I think it was one of like the most watched premieres in HBO history. I don't know how it like I'm interested to see how quickly it differentiates itself from just another post-apocalyptic zombie thing of which we've had infinity. Because I think it is, at least through the first episode, it is definitely that. It's just a very good version of that. So I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Cool. Yeah. I might check it out. Why not? Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds good though. I'm glad to hear that you are liking it. And yeah, I guess Pedro is the star, right? So it's gonna be good.
He is the star, and he's doing uh, an American accent,
Okay.
which is always fun to see.
Oh, nice.
He's trying to sound like Joel from the video game, which is working really well for him. He's great. The cast is great. Everyone's great. It's very good so far. So
I'll check it out.
yeah, I think that is gonna do it for us this week, right, Matt? I think
Yeah,
that's everything.
that's
So
everything.
if you have any opinions on God of War Ragnarok, we want to hear them. Please reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at doofmedia. You can, of course, always go to the subreddit r/doofmedia and find the thread for this episode to post in there about your opinions on these things. And let us know if you're just as pissed off as I am about this whole Star Wars thing, because Jesus, I'm mad.
Yeah, yeah, and also Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to do so you'll never miss an episode. You can find us on any of the major podcasting platforms.
I I paused there because I thought you were saying, and also Robert Rodriguez, if you're listening, let us know. I was like, Matt, do you really? Do you want that?
You heard me, Robert.
If you like what we do here and want to support us, please consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head on over to patreon.com/Doof Media and donate at any of the available levels for a bunch of cool bonus podcasts. We actually released 2 this week, Matt. We have you and I's new episode of Other Levels of the Tower covering the Stephen King mini series called Storm of the Century. And then also Elliot and Ruben continued their journey through random movies. They covered Puss in Boots 2, the sequel, which is apparently like a really good movie.
Yeah, I keep hearing that this is one of those like classics basically that you're going to love for the rest of your life, and I'm like, okay, all right, fine, I'm sure I will, but I'd probably take the kids to see it at some point.
You should, and report back because I want to know. I haven't listened to their episode yet because I haven't seen the movie yet, but
yeah,
they really loved it, and so everyone is apparently. It's wild.
Yeah.
Speaking of The Last of Us, though, if you guys don't follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/doofmedia, Elliot, one of the hosts that just covered Puss in Boots 2, is currently doing a playthrough of the original Last of Us over on our Twitch channel. He's never played those games. He wants to watch the TV show, but he felt that he had to play the game first at least. So he's running through The Last of Us, the first game, right now over on our Twitch. So you should follow us there and then check him when he's live. It's a good game, y'all, and it's fun to watch other people experience it for the first time.
Cool. I didn't know that. I'll check it out. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the content that we make here.
That is right. We will be back next week with what we were supposed to be doing this week, which is the Ridley Scott Deconstructing Scott movie, All the Money in the World, which is a movie I started watching, and then we decided to Audible, and now I have to finish watching it before my rental expires because I'm a cheap bastard and don't want to rent it again. So I think that's what I'm going to do right after we finish recording this one.
Sounds good.
But we will be talking about that next week. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.